Would you like to live forever? We are finally starting to understand the human brain. Born from artificial intelligence singularity, I give you the last machine.
The David Bramante Show.
Hi, David.
Hey, Andrew.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Terrific.
You've got a good radio voice, I'm noticing.
Oh, well, thanks. It's not for trying.
Got it. We're already recording, just to save on time.
Okay.
If that's cool with you.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Hi.
Hey. So yeah, because sometimes we talk and then we record, and then I want to cover the things we already talked about. It's just weird. So if we could just jump in. Thanks for agreeing to be on my show.
Oh, my pleasure.
You said you were traveling. Where are you right now?
Just got to Las Vegas a couple hours ago.
Oh, cool. How long are you going to be there?
Just a couple of days.
I'm going to be there. I'm going there on Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Will you still be there?
No, I'm leaving on Thursday, unfortunately.
Okay. Weird coincidence. So tell me, I got the book, I read it, and it's so, it seems so well researched, so in depth. So it's a lot. The book is very well detailed. So it seems like you guys have been working on this thing for 10 years. But how long did you guys work on it?
Altogether, it was a little over, I guess, a little over a year all in.
Oh, that's actually not too bad.
Yeah, the turnaround time was pretty quick.
Yeah. So I've got it here, the Genesis machine.
Mm-hmm.
I've got notes that I've been taking on it, but it's just so much stuff to dive into. And you have very different styles kind of in the book where you're going into the history, which I really loved. And there's other sources that I want to dig into. And then there's a lot of COVID talk, which is I guess it's still pretty political. So that's just kind of something that people are real world talking about, or, recently it was a big issue, and that's a big part of the book. And then you talk about all these different scenarios, which all kind of make me think about the movie Cloud Atlas. There's a part where they're like weirdly growing human meat things. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I have a long time ago.
Yeah. So then you start to think of all the crazy movies, of all the crazy scenarios. And it feels like if we're in the beginning of all of this stuff, we could go in any direction right now with all of this new technology. So then it's a little alarming, actually, to think about. Well,
I want to be clear. The book is a short overview of this new field of synthetic biology.
Right.
But biology is really the oldest technology, David. Like it's been around for billions of years. The thing that's really changing is it's starting to digitize now.
Mm-hmm.
We've spent the last really in earnest 50 years reverse engineering the cell at a molecular level now. And because of genomics, we've gotten right down into the operating system of the cell, which is fascinating. The fact that we can read the genome of an organism gives us really a bit level understanding of the code of that organism, of how it operates. So there's a lot of material in the book, but the book itself is not a book for scientists. It's a book about science, but told through the people and that are doing it, through stories that are very relatable, and it's meant to be an easy read.
Yeah, it's easy but very detailed, so I definitely recommend it.
It's well referenced.
Yeah, definitely.
Well referenced.
Yeah, definitely well referenced. Okay, so just jumping in. So the Genesis machine, you wrote with your writing partner, Amy. She's written a couple books. Is this your first book that you've written?
This is my first book. Amy's written a couple of bestsellers.
Okay, cool.
So this is
Well,
not
that's a good team up.
Yeah, it was really easy working with her, and a total pleasure.
So tell me your background in and how you got connected with Amy and how the book came together for you.
So my background is in cell biology and genetics. So I've been working in this area for quite a while. It's been an interesting path for me through science. I was very fortunate that I got to work with some of one of the largest biotech companies pretty much right out of school. After that, I was just fascinated by this field of synthetic biology, where we were actually starting to program life. And most recently, I worked with the company Autodesk, which is best known for its computer-aided design software. And then I've done a startup in the synthetic biology space as well, that's focused on building synthetic viruses, artificial viruses that target cancer.
What's that company called?
That company is called Humane Genomics.
Humane Genetics?
Humane Genomics.
Oh, Genomics. Okay. And then how did you get connected with Amy? You're the co-author.
Yeah, Amy, so I give a fair number of public invited talks.
Okay.
And we share a speaker's agent that introduced us.
Oh, there you go. Nice. All right, cool. Well, it's gonna be, since there's so much material in the book, I have a lot of conversations with people around artificial intelligence and robotics. And I've personally been coming to my realization that long before we ever come up with artificial general intelligence, there's going to be something that maybe is like Neuralink that taps into the power of the human brain, whether or not we really fully understand it. So it seems like that's sort of synthetic biology, what Neuralink is kind of trying to, well, I guess not, they're trying to attach pieces into the brain. Would you categorize what Neuralink is doing as synthetic biology, or is that something different?
I wouldn't look at that as synthetic biology. They're not really changing the genome of
They're just
the
tapping
organism.
in. Yeah.
That's neural interfacing. So it's
Okay.
And brain computer interfaces, BCI.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, we have, these devices as our interfaces today, the computers that we're using. But if you're a paraplegic, if you've got other damage, then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just can't use these devices. That's where something like Neuralink could be is really important.
So is there a company? Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, and they've made some of the tremendous advances in a very short period of time. And they're not the only one. Brain-computer interfaces are really an important area of development right now.
So is there a company that is doing something similar to Neuralink, where it's synthetic biology, but it's focused specifically on enhancing the brain?
No, not that I'm aware of. There's, with synthetic biology, the goal is to ultimately program the molecular machine that is the cell, and the components of the molecular machine, the enzymes, the proteins, the metabolic pathways in some cases, if it's more complicated, to do a function that is useful. In the book, we use the example of the mRNA vaccines that were developed for COVID. That's a very clear example of synthetic biology, where the actual a short nucleic acid protein program, and the nucleic acid program in this, with the COVID vaccine, it's an RNA program, a chemical relative of DNA that the cell uses to make proteins. And so they use synthetic biology to make that mRNA program. They encapsulate it in a lipid particle that can then, when injected, fuse with cells, deliver that program to the cell, and the cell machinery starts to make the protein, in this case, the spike protein of the virus, which generates an immune response. So that's a very familiar example of how synthetic biology can be used today. But really, it goes down to, you know, the ability to make any protein, program any metabolic pathway, and ultimately, and when this is an area that I particularly like, be able to produce the entire genome of an organism, essentially allowing that organism to be printed on demand. There's very few examples of that in the world today, because the field of synthetic genomics, or whole genome writing, is still so new. But it's clearly where, into my thinking, where the field will go over time as the technologies improve. The application space of something like this, David, is massive, because it can be something like a new food. It can be a medicine. It can be repairing a damaged cell, like a gene therapy, or that's causing difficulties. It can be making a vaccine. Ultimately, it can be programming the entire genome of an organism, like a bacterium, and eventually, as the technologies get better, further up the evolutionary tree.
Yeah, the thing with the COVID vaccine, it just got so political, and you talk about, I think, like the politics of a lot of this stuff, or the ethics of the synthetic biology, is that the issue, like, to me, the issue with the COVID vaccine was the mandating of the vaccine and the handling of how it rolled out. And so a lot of people got alarmed by the vaccine because of how it was kind of being forced, you know, on society. That, you know, in your book, you were saying, oh, this is there. I wrote the line, you know, people were clamoring for the vaccine. There are other people who are like, whoa, 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 you know, easy. So it seems like any application that you're talking about, there's going to be that response, and depending how it's delivered, it's going to be like wholly rejected or wholly accepted, and then it's going to be this like polarizing event again, whether it's the food, it's, you know, these vaccines. So that seems like it's going to be a reoccurring problem with how any of this is introduced. Do you have any ideas on how that can be handled?
Well, I think it's one of those things where just anything related to biology tends to be very polarizing. There's a lot of, you know, like I come at biology from a somewhat mechanistic point of view. I'm interested in the machinery of the cell and how the genome, which is the software of the cell, you know, really work. You know, how does this work at a low level to make a, you know, just a single organism? And I really do like to work bottom up. So most of my work is related to microbes. But that being said, the machinery that's in a living cell is universal, plant, animal, or microbe. It's basically the same squishy hardware. As for, you know, but so it tends to be polarizing. It's also the only biology is the only technology that we didn't create. So it's always going to be in a gray zone. We didn't make it. We've learned to take it apart and understand parts of how it works. We've learned to program the genetic code to make, you know, to make certain programs. But we didn't make the first living cell. People don't necessarily trust the programmers. It's still a field that is not widely practiced, like as opposed to something like computer programming, which today pretty much anyone can pick up and learn. The computers are available and cheap. There's more cell phones than there are people on the planet. And even though it's a complicated technology, we know everything about that technology and the supply chains because we built it all. So it's not polarizing to the point where people are saying you're playing God, you know, by working with a cell phone.
Right.
So you know, everyone's going to come at it with a different perspective. You know, perhaps one of the more challenging things is individual behaviors with something like a pandemic can have ramifications for others, whereas that's not going to be the case if you decide to, take a cancer medicine or not.
Yeah, exactly. So in one of the, is this one of your lines? Are humans just squishy machines? Did you guys come up with that, or is this like a common thing people ask? This was one of my favorite sentences in the book.
I can't say for certain that it was me or Amy, but yeah, we are squishy machines. All living cells are kind of squishing machines.
So in that, yeah, definitely. So and then can cells be programmed like computers? You believe yes. Squishy machines and cells can be programmed for sure.
Yeah, so another interviewer just asked me that the other day, and my answer is, like, for the microbes that I work with, which are clonal and very compact, ancient machines in some ways, I believe the analogy of the computer actually holds pretty well, because they really do all behave very similarly, even though they're each individual cell is a different organism. They really do behave in a very predictable way. So in that case, I think their genome and the way the cell operates is pretty similar to a computer program operating in a computer system. That being said, we humans are made of trillions of cells, and even though those cells have the same program, not all of it is turned on in every cell. Some of it, so there it's more like a computer network. So the genome acts less like a program and more like a recipe. And as anyone that's ever given a recipe to different chefs, you get very different results sometimes, even with the same instructions. So there it's a much more complicated dance. It's different. It really is the difference between a single computer and a global network of computers in terms of complexity.
Yeah, as I was thinking about it more, it's just all so crazy that it even is the way it is. It's so complex.
It's amazing that it works. Like,
and we don't even think about it. We just like go through our day and we don't think about how like amazing this whole thing is. So it's
we only tend to notice it when it breaks, and sometimes we get powerfully moved when we have our children, because then you really get to see the entire process start to finish, and it is truly amazing. And it's not a giant program. Like, the human genome is 3 billion bits of code. Their plants have bigger genomes. So it's not always, complexity is not always correlated with the genomic size. But yeah, I find it endlessly fascinating, awesome, like, and to the point where, like, I could I intend to spend the rest of my life studying it, and hopefully my kids will go on and study it as well, and at least be appreciative of it. Yeah. One of the best exercises is just to be aware of the biology that's around you in your life.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So with that said, do you have any opinions on consciousness and where it is? How does, for you, do you have any like personal theories on how that ties into us being these like super advanced squishy machines walking around?
I think it's, I think it's what uniquely distinguishes us from the other organisms on this planet. We have a unique consciousness. We have a unique ability to kind of dream in real time and imagine and create, and to model reality. We're also the only organisms that are even apparently aware of their of its own mortality and can project forward. Like, I usually say we're just the only animals that don't live in nature. We shape nature more than nature shapes us now.
Yeah.
So consciousness is really powerful. It's also been very difficult to study at a molecular level because the brain is firewalled, and so we all create different models. It's really the most complex machine organ in, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, in the known universe. So it's been one of the last organ systems to really unlock and study. But we're starting to get some pretty good molecular tools. We've got the human genome now, which was, which we had the draft since 2000. We've got the full genome finally completed to, a single base pair level just a few months ago, actually. And that gives us deep insights into at least the code changes that has led to our unique brains. So I think that the technologies that will continue to evolve and develop that will allow us to interrogate and manipulate and understand human consciousness more are coming.
Yeah, definitely. So do you feel like in the future, when we're able, going off of your book, just I'm gonna take some,
yeah,
when we can clone a human based on what you feel like is possible through, projecting off of this book, do you think that human will have consciousness by default because we've cloned the human genome in that new person? Do you think it's a given that it'll have that consciousness, or whether or not we know how it works, that it'll develop obviously from the clone?
Well, there's a lot of Hollywood ideas about
I know, yeah.
But clones are just identical twins, not born at the same time. And if
clones have consciousness, I mean twins.
Of course, like if you've
have
ever met monozygotic twins, they're both conscious.
Okay, that's a bold statement. No, of course. Yeah.
No, it's not. It's absolutely.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah,
I know.
Of course.
But, so no, like anytime, no, actually, I think people get sidetracked by consciousness most of the time, and consciousness you can think of as just real-time processing of sensory information, by any organism. Not every organism has human level consciousness, which is our ability to dream and model in real time. But you can argue that just about every organism is aware of its environment and responsive to its environment. So in some ways, I can rationalize even a bacterium being conscious. It's just not human conscious.
It's just on its level of consciousness.
Yeah, and it might be more, programmatic in its reactions, but not necessarily. It's sensing its environment. And certainly if you have pets and animals, you realize they have a lot of awareness, so they have their own level of consciousness. What I think, so again, consciousness is kind of this thing we focus on, but I think what's in some ways more interesting is, can we determine the molecular basis of our memory? And we already know that there's kind of real-time memory, just stuff that we're doing dynamically, and then there's kind of this consolidation process that happens when we sleep, etc., that allows us to kind of lock it in. I'm fascinated by memory, and it's not something, I'm not a neurologist, I don't study it deeply, but the idea of being able to one day understand the molecular basis of memory, the way that we've come to understand the molecular basis of heredity, I think would be amazing. Because
are there groups working on that, trying to figure that out?
Absolutely. Like there's whole fields, looking at that. But that's something that would be amazing. Of course, we lose our memories. They're constantly being processed. Some of them, with neurodegenerative disease. Yeah, well, our memories are not like computer memory, which is flawless. It's they get edited and reprocessed because they're.
So do you think that's a bug or a feature?
I think it can be both. I've met people with nearly perfect, near photographic or photographic memories. It's really interesting. My own memory tends to throw away extraneous stuff pretty quickly. It falls off the back of the bus. I can't say I carry a lot of baggage just because the memories really get detuned. The volume goes down very quickly. But that has some disadvantages. If I haven't, seen a person for a decade, I might forget 99% of, the information I had about them. So there's good and bad. I would love for us to learn more about it, simply because memory loss is a real problem as you get older. I think it would be fascinating if we could also learn to transfer memory and edit and manipulate memory in like the way we edit and manipulate genes, although that comes with its own set of ethical
I know all of
challenges.
it. All of it leads to like, it's. And I know you.
Any technology.
It's always like, that makes me think of like Total Recall, or
Yeah.
you know, or if you go in a slightly different direction, it's like Altered Carbon, like moving,
Yeah.
you know, jumping from. It seems like you want
shell
this
to shell.
You
Well,
want this.
what I love about science fiction is because it just opens up our imagination. And sometimes in science fiction, we go, oh, that would be really, really good. That would be really cool. And sometimes science fiction sets people on their career paths, or you know, starts up research programs. I can say this from my own life experience, and I'm getting old. Like, but the gap between science fiction and science seems to be getting narrower. Like,
the science fiction writers just less creative, or the technology is getting so much more like far-fetched?
I think it's I don't think they're getting less creative. I think that really
is it hard? It's kind of harder to wow us now.
It's harder to wow us, but you know, there's some really good science fiction out there. But you know, I tend to stick with the classics now. It's probably a function of my age, but the one that I just love, and it was the one that was just made into a brilliant movie recently, Dune by Frank Herbert.
Sure.
Like,
okay.
I absolutely loved that book, and there were others. I was, you know, Arthur C. Clarke.
What do you
was
love
wonderful.
about Dune?
What I liked about Dune was that it wasn't so dependent on technology. It was more really it put a spotlight on so many things that are just human in nature. Politics, religion, fiefdoms, power, you know, just warfare, economics, and for me that really was really like that, and so I found that really fascinating. And then one particular part that resonated, one character that resonated was Duncan, Idaho, and if you know, played by Jason Momoa in the movie.
He's like the main security general or something. I don't know his exact title.
Yeah, he's like the sword fighter, you know, one of the warriors. But he becomes a very important character in the series of books that Herbert wrote. And I won't give you any spoilers here, but
how many of the books have you read?
I read them all as they came out. I think I forget the exact year Dune was published, mid 60s, maybe as early as 65. I didn't read it until I was about 9 or 10 years old.
You read Dune when you're 9 or 10?
Yeah,
that's so cool. It's such a great book.
Yeah, it's kind of burned into my brain.
I haven't gone past the first book. I did see the recent movie.
Oh no, definitely pick up the second book, Dune Messiah. If the movie is a pretty good interpretation. You know, it won multiple Academy Awards for its technical side, but it's worth reading the book again, and it's definitely worth reading the second book.
But none of this stuff ties into like the stuff we're talking about, right? Dune, just in general, you like is there a science fiction?
Well, no, I think it touches on a lot of things. One, they banned in the book, they don't have artificial intelligence. They have mentats, like human computers, because at some point they allude to it that there was some sort of battle between the AIs and people, and that technology has been shut down. So there's a lot of really interesting things there. They talk about consciousness. The guild navigators and spice allow them to warp space, and navigate, the vast differences between worlds. So it does tie into biology.
Yeah.
Oh, you're testing me on it.
No, I'm just curious. No, I got definitely, I want to read the second book for sure. I think I was in a bookstore in Sonoma, really cool bookstore. There's like a little town square, and I forget the name. Anyways, they have like a really amazing book collection. And I had just read Dune with my wife, and I realized there's like 20, 30 Dunes now. It has like branched out so much.
Oh,
I don't know,
maybe.
maybe it's not that
Yeah.
many, but it was
I-
just like, wow, there's so many of this. It's kind of overwhelming. I don't think I could even, because the books are not like little 100, 200 page books.
Yeah, I don't know how
Very
many you
Yeah.
know, it is expanded. I think the original had 6, and then there was one. I think there was a 7th, but I'm not an expert on any of that. I just know when the books would come out, I would just curl up and savor them. I'd read them as slowly as I could.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, since we're on the topic of Hollywood, because it inevitably when you talk about this stuff, you can't not talk about it. You talk about it all the time. Reminds me of Gattaca a lot. You've seen that movie?
I have.
Gattaca. I kept thinking of that movie also through this. It's like if we're headed in this direction, which it appears that we are, then there's going to be a huge divide between the wealthy and the poor, the have and the have-nots, because they're going to be able to get and use this technology before anyone else, and they're going to be able to enhance, live longer, live better. I don't see how that can get involved, but you see that coming.
So Gattaca raised the idea of genetic bias and hierarchies and divisions in society, and I imagine,
and it all stems from that original family. They have a kid, or I think they have one son from sex, and the other one that's through synthetic biology kind of programmed to be a superior son. They're like
or selected. They never really go into the technology, but even if you can select embryos that have particular traits, you can choose
or select it. I never thought of it.
Yeah, so it might not, like, they really weren't getting into the engineering of it back then, but but it's a fascinating. The movie holds up. I rewatched it just recently, and I think it raises some very interesting points about how much our genes make us. And the reality is, we already know that it doesn't make that big of a difference. If you're one human being on a code level is not much different than another. And so many of the traits that we related to our behavior and intelligence and even our height are multi-gene traits, and there's no real model for it at this point yet. But the thing that I tend to point out is, at the beginning, some of these technologies may be accessible mainly to the wealthy, like any new technology, even cell phones, the classic scene with Mike Douglas on the beach with his brick-sized cell phone. But very quickly with technologies, it becomes something like our phone, which today there's more cell phones than people. So it tends to start with a smaller community and then become available widely. I really believe that biology should be the one technology that is not restricted to the wealthy, because it is the cheapest form of manufacturing. Like, to grow a plant, you put a seed in the ground and nature does the rest, sunlight and water and nutrients. Right now, the expensive part about making a drug is not making the drug, it's going through this really onerous clinical trial process designed to protect us and make us safe, which is itself kind of a two-sided coin. By making sure the drug does what it's supposed to do and not cause a bunch of side effects, it will help apparently a population of people. On the other hand, by taking 10 or 15 years to get a drug approved, you're not helping a lot of people. So there's always a trade-off between safety and efficacy and just availability. But I like to think that this technology of synthetic biology is following a similar path to computing in society, which at the beginning, computers were really only available to very small communities, militaries, academia, corporations, because they were large investments and they just weren't an everyday technology. And then they became personal and became almost toy-like in a way. And then we got this explosion of creativity, ever since, that has just literally transformed the world. So I like to think that, at least in terms of the dynamics, synthetic biology will follow a similar path. It'll go from being kind of an elite technology that really only the largest pharma companies and the academic, very specialized, to something a lot more like the PC revolution, where as more people come into it and the tools become more digital and more accessible, you don't need to have a lab in your home to start to participate or learn about this sort of thing. Then it really could break out and just become, a foundational technology for all humanity.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think if it doesn't go that way, then I just think the dynamics will drive it that way.
There's just no way it won't be that way for you.
Yeah, it's just like, even now, like, I started seeing these tensions arise decades ago, where there was a drug available that could save someone's life, but the only way to get that drug was by paying a really expensive amount of money, and even in the US, you often don't get the access to some of those state-of-the-art drugs unless your insurance plan covers it, and you're all the headaches around that process. I'm Canadian, by the way, so the US drug system and hospital systems for me always leave me scratching my head a fair amount. But that being said, for billions of people, they have zero access to that drug. So clearly, there's going to be, as these technologies become more available in digital, which is happening around the world today, we're going to see the appearance of competitors, to the established pharma giants. Yeah,
I guess I'm just concerned because there's that, and you talk about China a lot also in the book, but there's a company, I forget exactly, China BGI.
BGI. It used to stand for Beijing Genomics Institute, but it's no longer in Beijing.
Oh, where are they now?
Yeah, Shenzhen.
Oh, okay. Well, in it, you're saying that they are claiming that they can increase an IQ score by 20 points.
Well, they had a whole program at one point being led by a young genius researcher, going out and doing essentially genomic profiling of thousands of geniuses, looking to see, can we actually identify some of the inheritable markers of genius? Like, one, are there markers of genius that we can identify? And two, can we start to actually increase intelligence? And honestly, I don't know if that has where that research has gone in recent years. But
why were they saying that they can increase it? So how does that, is that something they're claiming that they could do for a child that you're about to have? They're not talking.
And I can't remember that exact quote in the book off the top of my head, or the reference. But I would expect that just as we get a better understanding of the cellular and neuronal architectures, we'll find druggable targets that correlate with intelligence. I won't say that we're going to be able to jack it up 20 points or 30 points or 50 points or 100 points. I don't know, but we will certainly have a better understanding of it, and probably start to be able to change some of the dials there. Is that I don't know, but consider, will we ever get a pill like in, what's that movie, Limitless?
You always have to talk about the movie. And that's my, honestly, as I'm reading the book, that's my biggest concern. And as I have more and more of these conversations, I just don't want to be on the outside of that revolution. I know you're laughing, and I'm laughing too, but I'm actually, that's my biggest concern.
There's a lot of drugs that make you feel smarter.
I want one that's actually verifiable.
Actually, I would like.
That's my biggest concern with all of this. I don't want to be left out of. If this technology is going to happen, I'm open to being the first. I'm open to being the first trial for these types of things.
But for me, it's more.
That and longevity.
Like it's not longevity for me. The one for me that has always motivated me is just cancer, because cancer's
Oh.
really a horrible disease that will strike either you or
And
your
it's a
family.
it's kind of a stupid disease that gets so many people.
Well, and I've always looked at it as, well, I describe cancer as an infection of your body with your own cells. But if you go back and look at the data from 100 years ago, the things that killed us were microbial infections. And wow, like microbial infections are, there's still a problem in like if you get septicemia, but most microbial infections never advance that far because we've got so many antibiotics. We're still, the challenge with cancer has been you're trying to target your own cells that have gone rogue in your body, and that's a really tricky problem. Whereas a lot trickier than killing off a microbe. But what it turns out is, well, no two cancers are exactly the same. And so it really, the whole premise of trying to find one drug that treats, a whole class of cancers is really difficult. And even if you find a drug that treats a class of cancers, all it has to do is the cancer cells just have to become resistant to that one drug, and now they continue on like a antibiotic resistant microbe, and it's just like, is that the best you can throw at me? And what we realize now is, no, every cancer is different. It's a mixed population of cells, and we kind of have to change the entire drug development paradigm if we're going to beat cancer. And it's taken my lifetime and longer to kind of come to that realization. And it's only now that we're starting to entertain the idea of making truly personalized cancer medicines. The CAR T therapy Kymriah that from Novartis is really one of the first that is a truly N of one treatment for cancer, and the data there has been stellar.
How do you spell that company name? Carthes?
Well, CAR T therapies is chimeric antigen receptor T cells, but it's where
not a company specifically.
No, what it is it's a process where for a cancer to exist in your body, your immune system, for whatever reason, doesn't recognize that the cells are misbehaving. Right. So, and there's a variety, there's many different pathways that cancer cells use to kind of hide from the immune system. But what they're able to do with a CAR T therapy is they take out your T cells, part of your immune system, okay, and they reprogram them to recognize the cancer, because the cancer cells do have what they call neoantigens on their surface that are different than normal cells. So they analyze the cancer, they reprogram the T cells to recognize these cancer-specific antigens, and then they infuse them back into the body after they've grown them up. And now these part of your immune system cells, your immune system cells back into the body, and now they've been like trained to hunt down and target the cancer cells and eliminate them, and it's phenomenal. Like, and
do they break down once they're
they kill? These are your immune cells. Their normal job is to police for invaders.
But these ones, do they then break down quickly to kind of go out of the system, or
the immune cells all turn off eventually, if they're not being challenged. But like these, this immunotherapy is incredible. Mm-hmm. So, and that's just one class of personalized cancer therapy. I think we'll see more of them, but in general, what I like to say is, if you really want to see the forward edge of biotechnology, mm-hmm, follow what's happening in the oncology space, because trying to do a repair of a genetic disease, of a broken cell, is a lot harder than being able to target and just deactivate a cell, like, mm-hmm, we need to do with an antibiotic or an anti-cancer agent. So I think cancer will be, kind of the bellwether of how these technologies are developing. And it's not the only one.
That for you,
for example,
Yeah.
For example, we should have insulin that's really affordable. One of the most it's not like it's old technology, but the skewed pricing dynamics has made insulin harder to for people to afford. I do want to point out that there's you must know Mark Cuban.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He is. I saw him speak at a meeting I was just at in San Diego, and he was talking about the company he just founded called Cost Plus Drugs. Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs, and basically he's been taking out the middleman in drug pricing.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely shocking at how affordable some drugs are when you take out all the bureaucracy that is grown and manifested between the manufacturer and the patient.
Yeah.
So that's really, not to put a plug in, but if Mark says, I don't care if I make another dollar, so I'm able to go and do this in a way that that no one else can.
Yeah, this episode is now sponsored by Cost Plus.
CostPlusDrugs.com.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah. For free. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so for you, it's cancer. That's the most maybe scary and promising thing that synthetic biology can fix.
I think that's one of the health area that could potentially touch, a third of our population.
Now, but for you, it's not. How old are you?
Old enough.
Okay.
I'm in my late 50s.
Okay. Do you want to live past, like you did mention towards the end, you did a little plug for Aubrey de Grey. I don't
know if it was a plug for Aubrey. Aubrey's been such a champion of longevity, but he's not the only one. And it's kind of turned from, it's kind of moved beyond an evangelism to multi-billion-dollar investments now by various groups trying to understand the aging process, which is such a wellspring of diseases. As we get older, systems start to break. Yeah. But in general, I'm somewhat of a longevity skeptic, simply because the advancements that we're starting to see really generate data, like give real results, are still largely in mice. We have not yet really got convincing data that it's going to affect our lives much as maybe
our extending the life kids. Of these mice.
Oh yeah, so if you're a mouse, this is a really great time to be alive, because they could probably cure your cancer and have you age healthy, and even correct some of the diseases of aging. So
good news for mice.
That's great. Good news for mice. Maybe it'll be really good news for our dogs, because I think dogs are going to be, our companion dogs, not research dogs, our four-legged family members are going to be a big part of opening up personalized medicine for us.
It'll eventually get to us.
And eventually get to us. But remember, we're very risk averse, and particularly when it comes to and there's a lot of people that
do you want to live till you're 100 years old?
I'm not optimizing for that, David. I'm optimizing for not putting off things that I think are really important to do. And I also try to keep as much of my time unsold as possible, like just keep it my own time, because time is still one of those resources that you just can't buy. And most of us aren't even really, don't even prioritize our time until we realize we're kind of running out of it as we get older.
Yeah.
But
you
just, happy belated birthday.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm excited about it. I'm breathing heavily only because it's like, this is probably one of the main topics, that extending my life. I really would love to extend my life span dramatically. And then separately is thinking that there's a group of people using this technology to become limitless, ultra human intelligence, and then everyone else is enslaved and dying, you know, when they're 85. And this group of people live to be thousands of years old, and they look gorgeous, and they're the smartest, and they have everything.
Well, that's totally a sci-fi trope, but
of course, but yeah, it just seems like,
yeah, like there's definitely groups that would like people to age healthier, and they're going to go after a large market. It's one thing to target a few wealthy individuals, but you know, in general, if you've got, your market would be essentially everyone. So so I think again it ends up looking more like cell phones than an elite technology. When it comes to IQ, how do I put it? Let's just say there's a lot of people that have neurological challenges that I think are far more worthy of R&D than intelligence right now, like schizophrenia and depression and traumatic stress disorders, like just traumatic disorders. All these things are real, can be debilitating. Alzheimer's, just neurodegenerative disorders. So I think in general, we're going to see a lot more R&D go into the neurospace for a variety of reasons. Right. And certainly some of them may be to enhance intelligence or keep our focus.
Yeah, that's the thing you mentioned. I think Amy suffers from, she has something. Was it just OCD or? But it sounded like you were kind of talking about.
I think we're all neurodiverse. Like, put it this way, most of the people
but you can kind of turn it on and off, you know, like if you want to focus on something, like laser in on something, well, maybe there's something you could take or inject, and then you kind of laser in and you go into that mode, and then you know, I guess it would kind of gradually.
Well, and I think there are some medications like that on the already available, the Adderalls, etc. I've never taken any of those. My neurodiversity I tend to describe as OC no D, because I tend to get very fixated on certain things, but I just use it as you know, what I go all in on in terms of my passions, my study, my research, my speaking, my just organizing my life. So for me, it's never been a disorder. In fact, I tend to describe it as a feature, not a bug. But I certainly, you know, if I was a kid today, I would probably, you know, be classified into some, you know, one of the neurodiverse buckets. I just think, you know, the world's a complex place, and you can find your place in it, hopefully, and thrive. But you know, some people may choose to do neuro explorations. I just think I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a lot of the explorations, you know, kind of be done by people that old enough to know who they are before they start changing the settings.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with. That kind of goes into maybe one of the last things I was wanting to talk to you about, which is genetic engineers. If somebody wants to get into this world, do they have to have been born a genius? Do they have to go to MIT, drop out, go to Harvard for a little bit, get by a startup? Or can somebody, let's say hypothetically me, I want to become a genetic engineer and I want to do synthetic biology. Is this something that I can do, or would I have to more approach it like tapping into a company like BioBricks and I'm stuck in the marketing world? I can't get into the real R&D of it.
No, that's a great question. You know, synthetic biology is the intersection of three big technologies. One of them is biology or life science, clearly. The other one is automation, like robots, and the other one is computation. And so, you know, and if you put computation and robotics together, you get things like AI and machine learning. If you take computation and biology, you get genomics and bioinformatics and just, you know, data science. There are so many different ways to get into this, that you know, the vast entry points. But it's with synthetic biology in particular, it helps to have an understanding of digital technologies. And so that's like every kid born today. Like so so the digital, understanding programming and digital technologies is a great way in, because that's really the foundation that we're standing on to start to do life science faster, better, cheaper. Robotics and automation, semiconductor technologies, software engineering. Software engineering for computers is pretty similar to software engineering for biology. And in fact, biology has a simpler programming language. But certainly we need software tools today to be able to start to program cells, just because we're working at a machine code level. So there's lots of entry points. What I usually recommend is, again, have a background in programming. Certainly.
Do people ask you this question?
Yeah. I
Oh,
talk
okay.
with a lot of students.
Yeah.
That are just, that are trying to find not only what technologies or entry points into the field they may want to do, but they're also looking at it like, how do I make a career out of this? Because typically, if one was interested in life science, you would go and do an undergraduate, and then you would start to do a master's or PhD program. I usually recommend, if you're going to do this, do a PhD program. Otherwise, you're going to be in kind of middle management. But then the academic institutions they've overproduced PhDs, and so they can't absorb them all into academia. So then you kind of have to go into either industry and get a job with a pharma company or similar, or you have to create your own company. And that's what's happening today, because the technology is digitizing and accelerating, and it's opening up, really whole new terrains for exploration. A lot of scientists are becoming entrepreneurial, because there's a lot of money sloshing around out there. Not all of it is at the National Institutes of Health. If there's plenty of compelling problems that we can start to address with biology, clean air, clean water, food, medicine, and materials, and so on. And so we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs. So even if you aren't a scientist or never want to spend a day in a lab, you can still work in synthetic biology if you're just good at being a project manager, being an entrepreneur, being a founder, understanding how money works, doing even marketing and communications around these topics, which are still unfamiliar with people. Like, the term synthetic biology is not as people have nothing to hook onto, even compared to a term like artificial intelligence, where both go really deep in the verticals. But the term AI has been around long enough that people still have some concept of it and how for understanding it. Synthetic biology or genetic engineering is we're still a few years away from that. Eventually, I believe that the term synthetic biology will be as familiar as computing.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I like the reference, that company BioBricks. They're making the references to Legos.
Well, BioBricks was actually more of a functional description of how it was a group based out of MIT that started modularizing the components of synthetic biology, the physical DNA, so that they could kind of be plugged and slotted together like Lego. But that's kind of, but it's already, that was 20 years ago almost. What's happening today is all of that modularization is now done with software tools. And usually it's just cheaper to synthesize the resulting DNA once you've finished the edits with it.
And they're doing that editing through the software side. It's not some guy with the tiniest little tweezers.
No. That's all just, stock imagery.
So the main software is CRISPR.
No. CRISPR is a gene editing tool. If you can't synthesize the DNA, you have to develop tools for doing cut and replace, essentially.
So I guess I don't understand this. If you could explain this, I go to a computer because I want to just start editing DNA.
So let's keep it at a really practical level. You want to make a modification to a protein. A protein typically is about 1,000 bits of genetic code, A's, T's, G's, and C's strung together. And it could be larger, it could be a little smaller, but let's just call it 1,000. And if you know the changes you want to make, typically in the past, you would have to physically edit the genetic code, this molecule. Think of it as a chain of of chemical links, you know, A's, T's, G's, and C's, and you'd have to physically cut that chain and add a new piece or make a change just in one of the nucleotides and put it together.
How was it physically cut?
We use enzymes that recognize stretches of DNA code and make a precision cut. And then we had other enzymes that would stitch it together. And then we'd have to run an experiment like sequencing to see, did it do what we expected it to do?
Are people watching it as this is happening?
No, this is all at the molecular level. So
there's
it's
no way to visually watch it as it's happening.
Not in real time, not with current technologies. So no, so this is why synthetic biology, this move to kind of digitize it, really took hold. It's because every experiment that required genetic engineering required more experiments just to validate the results. But now if you have that genetic code in kind of a word processor, and you say, oh, I want to take this nucleotide, which is a T, and now I want to change it to to a different one, a C, then now you just type. And the difference is we have printers today that can synthesize that DNA chain from the links, the individual links, the individual A's, T's, G's, and C's.
What is the platform or software that people are using for
this type of editing? There's multiple different editors.
Yeah.
Some of them are more intelligent than others. The one that has really become quite popular and used by many different groups now is called Benchling.
Benchling?
Benchling, L-I-N-G.
Oh, okay.
Benchling, and it's kind of the GitHub for synthetic biology. It's a really sophisticated set of tools, and they're not the only one. I don't want to put all of the spotlight on Benchling, but there's other tools that have been developed. Some of them are commercial, some of them are open, some of them are more specialized for particular jobs. But it's the software platform is changing all the time, because you can't do this type of work without some software tools. And then again, CRISPR is a technology for making edits to an existing genome in a reliable way, with very few off-target edits, so to speak.
So is Benchling using CRISPR or
no? CRISPR is a molecular system.
Okay.
Benchling is a software tool. You could design CRISPR constructs using Benchling, but no. And I recognize that this type of trying to understand these technologies is challenging, because you just don't get a lot of, they're not taught really, at least to adults, once you've left school. The students that are in school are learning about these things all the time now, because the life science programs have evolved as the technologies have appeared and come into use. But even just conceptually trying to understand, what is CRISPR? How does it work? How does a cell work? It's just not as familiar as some of these digital tools.
Yeah, the most advanced we got was, we were rudimentarily taking part a frog, I think.
Yeah,
pulling it apart. Okay, that's that. It's like that was so useless.
Yeah,
this kind of stuff is like really promising. So
the entry point for synthetic biology that my kids can access, my kids are 4 and 7, is a little robot that I really like called BioArtBot. BioArtBot.
Okay.
And I think it's a .org. Yeah. And it is literally a robot that is located in a laboratory in Oakland, California. And it is it's got a little interface where you can draw a picture, but when you go to print that picture, it's a robot depositing genetically engineered bacteria that have been engineered to produce different colors. So it ends up making an image with living organisms that grows as it develops, and it's really fascinating. So it's got all of the the basic processes of synthetic biology,
Okay,
working
I'll
with
take a
cells and robots.
Yeah.
You're not doing any genetic engineering. The biological inks that you're using have been pre-engineered, so to speak.
Okay.
But it is, I look at it as one of the really cool entry points into just understanding how you can do biology remotely using some of these digital tools.
Very cool. Okay, I'll take a look at that too. So you give me some more stuff to dig into. Well, any final thoughts? Any?
Yeah, I you know, what I try and you know, I hope it conveys is biology is not something we should be afraid of. It's the only thing we all have in common. It's what makes us. I think it is the most important technology that we're not only reverse engineering, continuing to get a more detailed look into understanding how it works, but are now starting to forward engineer and use it as another technology tool. I think it's the most important one we've got because, you know, although we live in engineered environments, it's the living world that sustains us and all the other creatures. And so we have to nurture and protect the living world. And I think a big part of the way humans do that is we're invested in it. And so I see this technology as being perhaps the most important technology of this century.
Yeah.
And there's certainly going to be some hiccups and some learning along the way, as we've had with computers, as we've had with networking, as we've had with social networking, and just media in general. I think there's going to be a learning curve, but I just as with computing, even though there's been hacks, there's been vulnerabilities, we haven't collectively come along and said, hey, all these computers need to get turned off. Let's go back to pen and paper. I think that biology will make it through the hump and just become a part of the foundation for civilization.
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating time to be alive because we're seeing, again, just such rapid progress in automation, computation, and now life science that it can be a little overwhelming. But as it starts to produce applications that are touching our lives on a day-to-day basis, and I think food will be the biggest one, because food is the biological application that that literally we need to sustain us on a day-to-day basis. I think that'll be really important. And then there's a chapter in the book that I think really highlights how aerospace could be one of the big drivers for synthetic biology too, because we can't put chickens and cows and palm trees in spacecraft. So if we're going to build self-sustaining environments in either in orbit, or if we get really ambitious out on the moon or Mars, we're going to have to learn how to engineer not just the spaces that we live in, but the entire ecosystems that make those spaces support life.
You believe that'll happen?
Oh, I think it'll absolutely happen.
Yeah.
The defining thing about humans is we are explorers, and we like to go to extreme environments and explore places where we haven't been before, because that's where we get to plant a flag and say, hey, we're the first here. This is really amazing.
Yeah.
And whether you're working, the thing about aerospace, once you're away from Mother Earth, you've got to be very, very thoughtful about your environment. One pinhole, you start to lose atmospheric pressure. You constantly have to be aware of every, the composition of the air you're breathing. The other, you have to be able to, we can't do it yet. We can't grow all of our food in space. We can't completely recycle all of our water. We can't generate all of our atmosphere, but we're definitely going to be, moving towards doing that.
We'll figure those things out.
Yeah, I want to go to a space hotel before I die and spend a week up there. Like that would be super cool. Right. And to do that, you're going to need, a completely different infrastructure than we've ever created. It's going to have to be, be bigger and
Well, I think your interests are very practical. Yeah, like really, like what's the actual like applicable things? Mine are like really far-fetched fears. I'm
Look,
like,
if you
oh,
were hungry, you would be like, how can this technology,
yeah,
help me eat?
yeah,
If
yeah,
you were sick or had a sick child, you'd be like, how can this technology help me or my child? And there's so many ways that we come at this. This is why I think it's just going to be one of the largest fields around, because life is the only thing we have in common, and we all are trying to optimize and have a good life.
yeah, definitely, yeah. I noticed there was thank you for all that. On 23andMe, I got an alert that I'm more Neanderthal. And I was like, oh no, that's a bad thing, right? It kind of it explains a lot of my interactions with other people. And I was like, okay, cool, it makes sense. That, and I'm like, I guess I got an alert that there's like an update of like, oh, you have more Nigerian than we thought. You're definitely more Neanderthal than anticipated. I got these alerts and I'm like, oh, this is starting to make a lot of sense. But
it's when you get the alert that you've got a half brother or sister that you didn't know about.
yeah. But mine was, when your book, you're like, hey, they weren't Neanderthals weren't half bad. Maybe there's some good things, So that was an uplifting. So people that got these 23andMe alerts that they're more Neanderthal than anticipated.
Yeah,
It's good
not
news. It's not bad news.
Not something to worry about. No,
Yeah, for
not
sure.
at all.
And then the other thing on that one, yeah, it's just so funny. I was reading about that. I guess that pretty much sums it up for me. Yeah, for me, all my thoughts are like so far-fetched and get so nerve-wracking, but for you, it's just more applicable stuff that this.
Well, I tend to focus on relatively near term. It's just, there's always the hype cycle, and I get as excited about these technologies as anyone, but I try and keep it at a practical level. Not so practical that I won't put some money behind some of the more futuristic sounding ideas, but I don't want to blow it up too much or get people's expectations, because it's funny. Overnight successes still take sometimes decades in the oven for it to appear. What's really exciting, though, for me, is you look at the incredible advances in DNA sequencing. Again, the first genome was sequenced, draft in 2000 after a massive international effort worth billions of dollars. And today there's companies like Illumina or Ultima Genomics that are promising, a $100 genome turned around in just a few hours. In fact, a new world record in sequencing the human genome was just done earlier this year, and it was under 6 hours. It was 5 hours and change, and that's staggering. Like that, the incredible increase in performance in these technologies.
Years, yeah.
And the thing that most people aren't ready to hear yet or understand or even comprehend is that the price performance of writing DNA is going to follow a similar arc. Today we can only write small genomes cost effectively, but I can imagine in 20 years we'll be able to write just about any genome for about the same cost as sequencing it. That's kind of mind-blowing. The other thing that I really I'm starting to see and appreciate more is that electronic technologies, like in our phones and computers, are now, which is nanoscale. Like the components on a chip are done at the nanoscale. Those are now starting to be directly faced with single molecules, single biological molecules that are also nanoscale, but carbon-based, not silicon-based. And so building that, it's like a neural link for molecules. Mm-hmm. That is such
You're talking. Now you got my interest again.
Yeah, and that's called, essentially these molecular, electronics that I think this is just amazing. And just a couple of weeks ago, I went to go see a company called Roswell Biotechnologies. Roswell, like they said, this is almost an alien technology. That's why they named the company as they did. But it's really one of the early leaders in molecular electronics. And it is, for me, just something that I think is going to be game changing as we learn how to do that technology better.
Yeah, definitely. So now that just makes me think. There's these guys that were putting poems and this I don't understand. In the book you talk about it. There's people and they get kind of a bad rap for doing it. They're putting song lyrics or poems or books inside DNA.
Oh, so this was Craig Venter and his team when they first synthesized the first bacterial cell genome. And this was done in 2010. Remember, DNA is just it's like magnetic tape. It's like you can store digital information digitally. And so they put into the genome of the organism all sorts of little Easter eggs, including the emails of some of the names of the people that did the genetic engineering, the email addresses, some quotes from James Joyce and others, and
But how if you stumbled on that DNA, how would you ever read it?
Oh, well, you sequence the DNA. And then you run it through software. And just how do we encode music digitally? Like you have to have a digital analog, conversion. Remember ASCII? Anyway, there are literally DNA, lexicons that you can convert any information digitally into DNA and vice versa. So we can already encode movies and books into DNA. And in fact, DNA is turning into a long-term data archiving medium because DNA as a chemical is very robust, whereas most of the digital storage technologies that we have, whether it's magnetic tape or remember the rewritable CD-ROMs, et cetera, all that technology tends to age out very quickly. So if you want to save a photograph of you and your children for 1,000 years, how do you store it so someone 1,000 years from now is going to be able to retrieve it? The thinking there is you write it in DNA code because that's still going to be relevant and interpretable
where do you keep
in 1,000 years. So DNA can be stored in a variety of formats. But the most efficient format is just as a dried pellet of the actual molecule of DNA.
And where would you keep this pellet?
Well, you can keep it in a tube. And as long as you keep it
where do you keep the tube so it lasts forever?
Frozen. You can keep it in a little bit of liquid frozen. You can put it
so
on a small set and put it in space. You can encode that DNA in another cell and keep it living.
Do you think that there's hidden messages in our DNA now that we don't know how to read?
Not written by others. But most
what
people
about
don't
a
know
previous human civilization?
Well, no, I think that's a little far-fetched. But here's something that's kind of wild. About 8% of our DNA is the deactivated virus backbones that brought in genetic code from infections over evolutionary time. So like we have just a ton of literally viral carcasses that are leftovers in our DNA from retroviruses that brought in genetic code throughout evolution. So, but are there any secret messages there? Like, read this DNA backwards. No,
there we don't know about written by somebody else.
But that'd be kind of interesting. Do you remember the movie Johnny Mnemonic with
Yes.
like, they're putting, information in someone's brain. But yeah, we can actually encode digital information into a living cell.
All right. Sounds good. I'm not convinced there's not a hidden message in there from this conversation.
Well, maybe we should think about that at like IVF clinics, just putting in a little bit of genetic mini chromosome with some background information.
Oh my God.
That'd be kind of funny.
Very funny. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for writing this book. It's really awesome. I really enjoyed it. It opened up a lot of doors, so I'm going to pursue those. But I really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're very welcome, and good luck on your next career as a synthetic biologist.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Terrific. Thanks,
Okay,
David.
bye.